It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. This is another edition of Frontline Friday with my very special guest, Bridget Gleason. Bridget, how are you today?
Andy, doing super. How are you? Where are you?
Super.
How are you? Where are you today? Which of your global empire offices are you?
I am in
sitting in?
The right coast today.
On the right coast, okay.
Yeah, East Coast. So.
And your orientation?
Yeah, we're in Manhattan, trying to stay away from the craziness that is Midtown Manhattan these days with the president-elect operating from his tower.
Yeah. That's probably one we should just not even venture down that path.
Well, no, I wasn't talking about the politics. It was just the
logistics.
The logistics, yeah. If you have, especially at this time of year on Fifth Avenue, this is Christmas time. This is when people want to be out on Fifth Avenue looking at the windows of all the Christmas displays. And there's some interruption going on. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting experience over the 4 years because, when the presidents come to town, I don't know if they do this for the president-elect, but once they're in office, they're very... when the president comes to town, to Manhattan, and they are... they know where they're going. Yeah, they clear the route. And, if your car's parked on the side of the road, it's gone. They relocate cars. They're quite adept at that to make sure they're all gone. So it'd be interesting to see for somebody that, because we only get the occasional visit from a president, but now if for a sitting president that will come to New York very often, it'd be kind of interesting to see what sort of turmoil that creates.
Better get used to it. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I do keep an eye on, as much as you can, you sort of do keep an eye on the travel schedule of certainly the president, and is because if you happen to be coming into sort of a similar airport at the same time, yeah, you'll be waiting because they clear the freeways, right? And they go down, they close all the on-ramps and off-ramps to the freeways so the presidential motorcade can go by. And yeah, I got stuck once. It took about an hour to the trip. So anyway, whatever.
Oh dear.
So anyway, yeah, let's talk about. So for people, I think we talked about this last time. You have a new job.
True.
And you're now vice president of sales for Logs.io, LOGZ.io, for people who want to look that up. If you're in the big data space, you need to be talking to Bridget. So, but you have an interesting...
Or if you're looking for a job and you're in the Boston area.
Oh, okay, there you go. What sort of job are you looking for people in the Boston area?
Sales, all kinds of sales. So technical sales, some technical aptitude, but definitely Boston and San Francisco. I would say
inside or account execs, or what are you looking for?
Account execs.
Okay. So there we go.
So this ties to the topic.
This ties to the topic because we want to talk about, okay, you've done this before. You're creating a sales organization from scratch. In this case, a little more challenging because the center of gravity in this company, in terms of the headquarters, is actually in Israel, and you're setting up the operations here in the United States, the sales operations and so on. So just wanted to spend some time in this interview talking about, okay, how do you do that? How are you setting that up? For the people that have startups and aspiring entrepreneurs and maybe, first managers in the door that are setting up sales team. What are you looking at doing? What are your priorities?
Well, as you said, Andy, having a company that's based in Tel Aviv, which is 10 hours ahead of me here in San Francisco. So let's just talk about challenge number one, which is time and geography. Mm-hmm. And for a company that is global, and we are increasingly in a global world, and there's more and more companies that are actually coming out of places like Tel Aviv, this is a reality that learning how to set up, manage distributed teams is something we have to get we have to be good at. So, you know, I'm probably in some ways, well, for sure, I am not geographically optimal for Logs.io either as a VP of sales, because we are, and this was partly my decision as well, in terms of the sales organization, we're going to have the sales sort of center of gravity for the U.S. will be on the East Coast. And I'll tell you why we thought about it. And this sort of relates to, I'll tell you what we're doing, and people can extrapolate when they're thinking about it in their own situations. Headquarters in Tel Aviv, that 3 additional hours of overlap that you get on the East Coast to Tel Aviv is actually really important. And so that was one factor that we took into consideration. Another factor we took into consideration when choosing when and where to build out the sales team was, where can we get talented people that we're looking for at, I don't want to say at a price point, because that makes it sound, it's harder for a startup to compete for great sales talent in the Bay Area.
Sure.
We're not a known entity. We can't always pay the same that a bigger, more established company can pay. And there's a lot of movement in Silicon Valley. People don't necessarily stay at jobs quite as long, which can be expensive. It's expensive for everybody. It can be super difficult for a small company. So that was another reason we thought the Boston market specifically, we've got a good pool of talent. 4 of there are 5 people on the executive team. 4 out of the 5 of us have lived in Boston. So we've got networks there, which is also very helpful. Our investors are there. Our lead investor with this last round is there. So just some very practical considerations that we made around where to physically locate a team. So that's one. The second is, when we're thinking about our sales model, we're a SaaS business. Up to this point, Andy, all of the sales has been done out of Tel Aviv over the phone with no one not meeting customers and prospects. Very technical, some very small deals, but also some very large multi-year deals. The model that we're building is sort of an inside/hybrid role. So we'll have an SDR team that helps with, we get a good amount of inbound, help filtering the inbound. We'll have someone work on outbound. We'll have the account executives, let's say sort of a good, solid mid-range account executive, somebody that's had a couple years of experience but is looking to grow their career and handle sort of some SMB mid-market, but also grow. And that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Is let's start there. We know that that's where the majority of our targets are, kind of in that mid-market space. So we want to have the sales reps match and their experience match sort of the customer segment that we're going after.
Got it.
That's sort of a starting point. Maybe you can ask some questions in and around that.
Well, sure. So now are you regretting having moved from Boston back to the Valley? Since you just moved from Boston a year ago.
Yeah, for people who don't know, I moved. Yes. No, I came back. I came back for personal reasons, which I needed to.
Sure.
It's interesting. I will go and spend a lot of time in Boston. Could definitely move back to Boston. We'll always need a presence in the Bay Area. I found also, Andy, I don't know if I told you this, that when I was living in Boston, I was probably there 7 to maybe 10 days a month. I was back in the Bay Area at least a week a month. And then I was traveling in other places. So my primary home is United 22F. That's where I spend quite a bit of my time.
Well, yeah, I'm familiar with that home. So
I'm sure you are.
Right. So I guess the question becomes, for a lot of people, this issue of remote management of teams, especially a small team at the beginning. it's pretty crucial because you got to set the culture, you got to set the vision in place, and make sure people are, aligned with what you're trying to achieve. So, what do you see as the particular challenges right now in this early stage to make sure that all gets set up appropriately?
Well, the biggest challenge and the thing that we talk about internally right now is where people are located versus where we want them to be located. So I talked to somebody actually this morning. I'm hiring a sales ops person. Mm-hmm. Ideally, that person will be in Boston, where the center of gravity is. I've talked to some great candidates in the Bay Area. So the discussion we're having internally is, do we optimize on talent? Do we keep looking? I'm sure we can find a great person in Boston as well. Like, where do we optimize? I tend to be a location agnostic wherever I can, because I just think great talent is really hard to find. So one of the challenges we're having is, my network is here. My network is in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. I do have a network in Boston, but I am a larger one here. So how do we balance location versus talent and known entities, and trying to create these mini pods of people that can be supportive of one another. And I think at what rate you hire and who is always a challenge. You hire too many salespeople too quickly, and you can get everybody frustrated. You wait too long, you may be behind the eight ball a bit. So trying to figure out what's the right time, understanding how long it takes to get someone onboarded, and really for us, creating a culture. We're one team.
Well, that's the challenge, I think, with geographic diversity. I mean, I've certainly, as someone who's worked in 8 startups, worked directly, and many, many more that I advised, is that the issue of when you're getting started about where people are located, that is a tough one, because I have found that the most successful ones, quite frankly, were where people were all co-located. Exactly. And so, it's got to be a tough decision as you're thinking about that, because, as you said, is finding good talent that's not located where you're, in Boston, let's say for you, and the challenges of getting everybody together, feeling like they're on the same team. There's all the hallway conversations, especially a new company, right? I mean, so many things are happening so fast, and sharing best practices and experiences, dealing with customers and so on. Those hallway conversations really become invaluable. And it's hard to replicate those. I know there's, we all use the technology, the collaboration tools and so on, but it's not quite the same.
Well, and I think, Andy, this is a challenge we've got to figure out. And I think great companies are going to figure this out earlier, because what we're seeing increasingly is great employees are demanding, maybe is a strong word, but they're requiring flexibility in where they work, and they don't always want to live in the hubs where we may want them to live. And we're having to figure out how to accommodate them if we want them to be part of them to be part of our company. And so I think about that a lot. How can I create an environment where people may be distributed, but we still feel like we're still able to have some of those conversations, and we're still, we feel connected. And we talk a lot about this at Logs.io because they're in Tel Aviv. Mm-hmm. The headquarters is in Tel Aviv, and there's no way getting around the fact that they need to be a distributed company and that they need to have a presence here. And so we have to figure it out. We want to minimize the friction by having these pods of people, as opposed to, I'd rather have 2 pods, 10 people in each pod, than 20 people geographically dispersed around the United States.
Yeah, well, for sure. Right. Yeah. Agree 100% on that. So you're talking about
it's a challenge.
It is, yeah. So you're talking about the account execs earlier, that you're really looking for someone with pretty solid technical background.
Well, technical aptitude. And this is, Andy, there are different schools of thought on this as well. My first job at Xerox, my hiring manager, and it was sort of the Xerox philosophy at that time, was you really screened for sales acumen. And because it's hard to teach certain emotional intelligence, how will you read people, work ethics, some really internal things, self-discipline and motivation, and those are hard to teach. And they would optimize on that, and their philosophy was, you get a smart person, you can teach them just about anything. And if they've got the other internal drivers, you can teach them just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
I largely ascribe to that philosophy. I look for people that are self-directed and motivated and smart and curious and have integrity and things like this. And I feel like we can teach them technical, but they have to have, when I say somebody that's been in a technical environment before, I want them they'll do better if they enjoy technology. If they have some technical aptitude or interest, they'll just enjoy the job more. And it's important to me that the people who I work with, and that they enjoy what they're doing and what they're learning and what the product is about, and that it's just interesting to them. So I look for people that have some technical, at least interest, curiosity, aptitude. Because I'm looking for a mid-level rep,
mm-hmm.
typically if they are interested, they will more likely have gravitated toward that kind of sales environment already.
Yeah, I mean, what I look for in that type of role is someone that embodies what I call systems thinking. Right? That they, if they're not a real technical person themselves, that at least the aptitude extends to being able to understand how the whole system works together, right? Not just maybe the role that your particular piece of software fits, but but how it fits into the whole thing, right? That they see from end to end, that they have a bigger world view about this problem that the customer's trying to solve and the role you have in solving it. So to me, that's another layer. And I really like people. And I for years sold these large complex communication systems, and I had people that had some technical aptitude, but if they could really see the big picture, the chances of them succeeding were much. Well, first of all, that meant they were more curious because they'd gone out and learned and have this bigger picture orientation, which to me almost always translated into a greater odds of sales success.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good point. How do you interview for that?
That's a good question. It's I'll have to think back some of the interviews that I did.
Yeah.
But in some cases, it's just talking about what they've done, right? Mm-hmm. And how they approach solving an issue for a previous customer. And to me, that was one of the things I really wanted to dig into is, give me examples, hard examples of things that you have done. Start at the beginning, take me through the thought process. How did you arrive at the solution? And if you really, spend time really digging in on that and, not taking answers necessarily at face value all the time, but, prodding, probing, you're going to uncover, is this person, hey, they couldn't have lived without the technical engineer next to them, sales engineer next to them, or, what could they really do on their own and how are they able to drive this? And you'll begin to uncover that pretty quickly. But just it takes probing. And a lot of hiring managers, they want to ask the superficial questions, but it's better to go deep.
Yeah, good, really, really good point. I'm going to add that to my list of qualifications because I agree with you. I think that's a really important one. Somebody that's that's able to see the big picture and is a systems, I like that phrase also, a systems thinker. The other thing that's important at Logs.io, and I'm sure it's important in other companies as well, is the cultural fit. And that's when we're trying to build one team. When I was at reInvent this last week, the big Amazon conference in Las Vegas, and there's a couple new members. Our first U.S. sales hires, so a sales engineer and one very senior account executive, myself, and my director from Tel Aviv, my sales director from Tel Aviv, was over as well. And she'd said to me, okay, I want to take a picture of the U.S. team. And I said, no, I don't want you to I want this. We're one team. I don't want to start thinking about us so early as the U.S. team and the Tel Aviv team. Let's think about us as a single team. And it's a little thing.
That's a big thing.
But it's also a very big thing, is that we're one team. And hiring people that are of this mentality, the two that I hired, I've worked with before, and I know how they are. I know that they are very team-oriented. They're super hardworking. They're people who say yes whenever they can. That's a good cultural fit. And being a good cultural fit is as important as any of the other qualifiers that I'm looking for.
Well, and I think that this whole idea of teamwork and being on the same team is really important, because too often, and especially in tech startups, there's the technical team and the sales marketing team. And even the sales and marketing could be separate teams. And yeah, having a culture that says, look, we're all one team. We may do different roles, but we support each other. Without all of us working together to the same goal, we're just not going to make it happen. And I started thinking about this week as I ran into at the airport this week. I ran into a former colleague from a company I'd worked with. A company that started small, and we'd gone public, and they're a pretty big company now. But one of the things, even back then, this was 20 years ago, is we didn't have a sales function. And the company is well over $1 billion in revenue. And they still really don't have a sales function. And yet they sell these really large deals.
How do they do that?
Well, because they bring together the team of people that have to work together to make it happen. From all the disciplines required to work with the customer to make it happen. And this guy was telling me about a $350 million deal that he had worked on that closed. There was a big team that was doing it, but there was, project managers, and there was a lead sort of quote unquote business development person, but who was also very technical in their background. But, that's the way they handle opportunities. We bring together the right disciplines to be able to do it. But, they've grown to this size where I think they have one division where they have some people that are formally labeled sales, but for the bulk of the company, no.
This is a discussion that we've also had internally when just thinking about designing comp plans and quotas and that sort of thing, is on the big deals, it really does take a village. And oftentimes, and not to take anything away from the salespeople, because they certainly are huge in what they do. But it often requires like this team of maybe a product manager, it's a CEO, it's somebody in development, it's product, it's a sales development rep. There's so many people that came together to make that deal happen. And how do we make sure that we recognize appropriately all the different people, especially in big, large, complex deals that come together to help bring something to the close? It often is a big than just people on the sales team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's. I'm gonna try to find somebody from that company to bring on the show to talk about how they do it without sales.
Oh, I'd love. I'm always curious
because they're selling.
Always curious about that.
Right, they are selling. There's no doubt they are selling, but how they do it is a different model than a lot of companies. So. Well, Bridget, we're going to wrap up this episode right now. As always, we're going to spend a lot more time in the future as you continue to grow your organization to talk about this. But as always, pleasure to talk with you. And
likewise, and good luck with the traffic jams out there in New York.
Yeah, we'll keep everybody updated on that as well as we go along. So Bridget, thanks. Friends, thank you for listening again on this episode of Frontline Friday, and we will talk to you next week.
Have a great one.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.